The scene from that day I can never forget. My son standing in front of everyone bragging about paying for the wedding without ever mentioning me. But the truth, it was me who secretly contributed $100 million for that wedding, while I was told by the driver to take me home midway with no official invitation. That's when I realized family can be trampled on at any moment. If you think this is just a normal family story, you're wrong. Subscribe now. Don't miss the next shocking stories from us. Before all the truths came to light, I used to believe that family was where I could find support. But a horrific betrayal changed everything. When dawn whispered over Riverbend, Oregon, the town was still wrapped in mist, like a sleeping child under a cotton blanket. Main Street hadn't stirred. The storefronts were quiet, the lampposts blinking their last flickers. But in a small yellow-painted house tucked just off Willow Creek light was already glowing through the kitchen window. Inside, Margaret May had been up since 4:30. There was no alarm. Her body simply knew. The way old trees know when to drop their leaves, or how rivers remember their bends. 65 years old, alone for over 2 decades, and yet every movement of her hands had precision, rhythmic, almost meditative. She was kneading dough on a marble counter worn smooth by years of use. Her palms moved with purpose, push-fold, turn-push again. The air smelled of yeast, sea salt, and faintly jasmine. Her hands, those gnarled, flour-dusted hands, knew this dough like a mother knows the curve of her child's jaw. Margaret May had run May's Bread and Crust for nearly 30 years. No sign outside, no website, no Instagram. Just her name spoken at farmers' markets, at town hall potlucks, in whispered gratitude by hungry teenagers and single fathers, and retired teachers who swore they'd never eaten anything like her sesame rolls. She wasn't rich, but she was known, and that had always been enough until now, because in the quietest part of her heart, something had been cracking. His name was Evan, her only son. He'd been the reason she opened this bakery in the first place. When his father James passed away unexpectedly in the spring of '92, Margaret had 2 choices: collapse or rise. She had flour, fire, and grief. So she built something real, something hot and golden and capable of feeding more than just hunger. She raised Evan between ovens and homework, between market deliveries and piano lessons. He used to sit on the kitchen floor, flour all over his cheeks, asking her, "Do I smell like a cookie yet, Mama?" And she'd laugh. Oh, how she used to laugh. But time stretches people, and sometimes it stretches them into strangers. Evan had grown, graduated top of his class from Riverbend High, left for Portland State, got his master's in education. Now he was Dr. Evan May, 38 years old, tenured professor of civil engineering at Columbia Hills University. Margaret had watched it all like someone watching her reflection slowly walk away in a dream. He no longer called her Mama. He called her Mom in emails, sparse emails, efficient emails. She hadn't seen the inside of his apartment in years. He said it was not really suitable for visits. Once she offered to bring her famous sourdough over for a potluck at his campus. He told her gently but firmly, "They cater from high-end places, Mom. It's a bit more formal." She'd swallowed that like a bitter sip of cold coffee. Now Evan was getting married. Her heart clenched every time she said it aloud, or just in her chest. Annabelle Redford, daughter of Lawrence Redford, the director of Oregon's Department of Urban Development. A family with a name you didn't say you introduced. Margaret had met Annabelle once. Just once. The young woman had the kind of poise that came with money smiling with her lips, not her eyes. She shook Margaret's hand like she was accepting a donation. Not cold, not cruel, just distant. There had been no official invitation to the engagement dinner, just a group photo on Facebook. Evan in a blazer too expensive for his salary, Annabelle's ring catching the light like a dagger, and both of them beaming. Not a single word about the mother who raised him with her bare hands. But Margaret was no fool. She didn't wait for permission to love. So she did what she had always done. She acted in silence. That Tuesday, after baking her final batch before lunch, she wiped her hands, put on her best pressed navy blouse, the one with the tiny stitched daisies at the collar, and took a bus to Columbia Hills. 3 transfers, 1 wrong stop, but she made it. The wedding office sat inside a sleek glass building with touchscreens and elevator music and a front desk clerk who looked at her like she'd walked in from 1965. Margaret smiled kindly. "I have an appointment with Ella Carter. I'm here about the Redford May wedding." The receptionist tilted her head. "Are you with the planning team?" "I'm the groom's mother." There was a pause, then a strained smile. "Right. Yes. Please have a seat." Inside the private conference room, a young woman in her late 20s, all pearls and PowerPoints, introduced herself as Ella. "We've already got the bride's family coverage sorted, but there are still some items open if the groom's side wishes to participate." "I'd like to cover the reception," Margaret said softly. Silently, no announcements. Ella blinked. "Excuse me? I want to pay for the reception hall, the catering, the photography, but no names, no mention. Just make it look like it came from the bride's family. I don't want him to know." Ella hesitated. "That's unusual." Margaret folded her hands. "Is it possible?" The younger woman nodded slowly. "Technically, yes. We can mark it under family contribution without a name." "Good." From her bag, Margaret pulled out a check. 4,200, another, 12,600, and finally a sealed envelope containing $27,000 in savings bonds, withdrawn early from a fund she had once intended for her retirement. She had converted every penny of her personal savings, $100,000, into that wedding. Margaret smiled. "He doesn't like my bakery, doesn't want his colleagues to know I still wear a bakery apron and drive a truck with rust on the side. But I want this day to be perfect. I want them to walk into that ballroom and feel proud, even if they never say thank you." Ella didn't know what to say. She simply nodded, took the documents, filed them, silent. On the way home, Margaret didn't cry. She didn't even sigh. She stopped by the fabric store, picked out pale gold silk ribbons and lace, and made a list of ingredients for a custom batch of wedding loaves, traditional round breads, braided with rosemary and sea salt. She would bake them the night before the wedding, wrap them by hand, and deliver them anonymously to the hotel. Her hands could not sign a wedding guest book, but they would sign every crust she baked. That evening she lit a candle next to the old photo of James on the mantel. "Our boy's getting married," she whispered. "I did what I could love. He won't know it's from me, but you'll know. I hope that's enough." Outside, the willow trees along the creek swayed gently. The river whispered against the rocks like a hymn. And somewhere in Columbia Hills, her son Evan was trying on tuxedos, practicing his speech about independence, while his mother measured flour in grams of silence. Tomorrow she would start the dough. Tonight she would dream. But even in her sleep she would never expect what was coming, because Margaret May had given her all for a wedding she wouldn't be invited to. And the only RSVP she would ever receive was betrayal. It was just past 6 when the first light sliced through the clouds over Riverbend, turning the mist along Willow Creek to gold. Inside the little house with the yellow trim, the aroma of baked rosemary still lingered in the air. The oven had cooled. The kitchen was spotless. Margaret May stood at the mirror in her bedroom, adjusting the pin on her áo dai, the Vietnamese long dress she hadn't worn since Evan's college graduation 10 years earlier. This one was new. Pale sapphire silk with ivory threadwork along the sleeves. She had it tailored in Portland 2 months ago, and though the seamstress had politely suggested something more age-appropriate, Margaret insisted on this color. Blue was Evan's favorite growing up, sky blue. He used to point at clouds and ask, "Can I sleep in that?" Her hair was twisted into a neat bun, lacquered in place with old-fashioned grace. She'd applied the faintest touch of powder to her cheeks, lip balm, nothing more. At 65, her face bore the elegance of a woman who had never asked for pity, only space. On the kitchen table rested a box the size of a small suitcase. Inside, stacked with care between layers of parchment, were the wedding loaves. She'd made each one by hand, all 24 of them, baked with rosemary and sea salt, topped with a red wax seal. She embossed herself a letter E entwined with an A. Evan and Annabelle. She had tied the box shut with silk ribbons and affixed a handwritten note on top for the celebration of love and new beginnings. No name, no claim, just that. At 7:05 a.m., a white Lexus pulled into the gravel driveway, engine humming low. She hadn't expected a ride. It was thoughtful, she assumed, practical. She picked up the box, held it against her chest like an offering, and stepped outside. The driver got out immediately. A young man in a navy suit, no more than 25. Hair parted with a heavy hand of gel clipboard in one hand, phone in the other. He paused when he saw her. For half a second his face stiffened like someone bracing for awkwardness. "You must be Mrs. May," he said, trying to smile. "I'm Oliver. I'm here to take you to the venue." She smiled gently. "Thank you, son. Let me just—" She walked carefully to the passenger door, setting the box down in the back seat with precision. When she got in, the interior smelled like new leather and cologne. Oliver glanced at her through the rearview mirror. She could feel it, his hesitation, something coiled and unsaid. As they pulled out onto the main road, he cleared his throat and handed a folded envelope over the seat. I was told to give this to you." She took it, unfolded the single piece of paper inside. It wasn't a letter, not even a card, just a text printed in large, bold font. "Mom, please just let the driver take you back home after pickup. Today is a private ceremony. We're keeping it small and elegant. Thanks for understanding." It wasn't signed, but she didn't need a name. Her breath caught like something cold and metallic had dropped down her throat. The silence in the car changed. Oliver kept driving, eyes fixed ahead, but his grip on the wheel tightened. She didn't speak, just folded the paper carefully and tucked it into her sleeve. Outside Riverbend was waking up. Cyclists zipped past bakery windows open to the morning rush, and along Willow Creek the mist was starting to break apart like old illusions. 10 minutes passed, then 15. Finally, Oliver spoke, his voice low, almost ashamed. I probably shouldn't say anything, but Mrs. May, I just want you to know this wasn't my idea. I'm just the driver. I was told to follow instructions." She looked at him in the mirror. "It's okay, son. I understand." He hesitated. "I mean," Mr. May said, "well, he said it might be uncomfortable if you were seen at the front. The bride's family, they're more formal, more—" Margaret turned her gaze to the window. "I see. I'm just repeating what I was told." She nodded once. "And where exactly is the hotel?" He blinked. "Ma'am, I won't be staying, but tell me where it is, so I know which roads not to walk near." Oliver swallowed. The Redford Ballroom at the Lorrimont. Of course it was. The Lorrimont Hotel. 5 stars. Grand staircase. Marble floors so polished you could see the arrogance in your own reflection. She had passed it once, thought it looked like something out of a movie. Now it felt like a door she wasn't allowed to knock on. As they approached a roundabout, she said quietly, "You can let me off here." He glanced back. "But it's another 10 minutes to the house. I can walk." No, I mean, are you sure?" She looked him in the eye through the mirror and smiled. "Son, I have walked farther roads than this. You go on ahead." He pulled over. She stepped out with the grace of a queen exiting a stagecoach. She lifted the box of loaves from the back seat. As she closed the door, she turned to Oliver one last time. "Tell my son," she said, "that his mother wishes him joy." And then she walked, box in hand, step by step, away from the road to the ballroom, away from the people dressed in borrowed manners, toward home. Back at the house, she did not speak. She placed the box of wedding loaves on the table and slowly untied the ribbon. One by one, she removed the rolls, unwrapped them, and placed them in the center of the table. Then she went to the cupboard, pulled out a plate, and laid a single roll on it. She sat down across from it and stared. The crust had risen perfectly, golden brown. The seal melted just enough to press gently into the dough. Her fingers brushed over it lightly, reverently, like touching a child's hair. Beside her elbow was a printed receipt, proof of the $100,000 she had transferred to the wedding coordinator, all marked Redford Wedding Package. She didn't cry. She didn't scream, but something inside her folded, not snapped, folded, like parchment, like the last page of a book you wish had ended differently. She reached for the receipt, pressed it flat on the table, stared at the numbers, each one clearer than her son's voice. Then she whispered into the stillness, not to anyone in the room, but to the kitchen walls, the baking trays, the heavens. So this is the cost of being forgotten. Outside, the sun had climbed halfway through the sky. Inside, a woman sat at a table full of bread she had made for a wedding she would never attend. And all around her the silence had teeth, because sometimes the sharpest cuts don't bleed. They sit, they settle, and they never quite heal. Tomorrow the town would speak of a grand ceremony, champagne towers and glowing reviews. But in the quiet streets of Willow Creek there would be one woman whose name no one mentioned, and a box of bread no one ate. Not because it wasn't delicious, but because no one thought to ask who baked it. That night the house was too quiet. Margaret May sat by the small desk in the corner of her living room, staring at the tea she'd steeped, but never drank. The porcelain cup had gone cold in her hand. Outside Riverbend lay still, no wind, no footsteps, just the soft humming of streetlights through the window screen. The box of wedding loaves still sat on the table behind her, untouched, like ghosts that hadn't found peace. She didn't cry. That had passed. Whatever part of her that could break had already done so, and now all that remained was steel, quiet steel, the kind forged in disappointment and cooled in silence. She reached into the bottom drawer of the desk and pulled out her old scratched-up phone. The kind of phone that still clicked when you typed, the kind that knew how to keep secrets. She scrolled past names of old suppliers and bakery orders until she found the contact she needed. Long, her cousin's boy. He was 26 now, last she'd heard. Studied digital media in Portland, freelanced weddings and corporate events on weekends. A kind kid, a little scattered but brilliant behind a lens. He used to follow her around the bakery when he was 12, filming her kneading dough on an old camcorder and pretending it was a Food Network segment. She tapped the call button. It rang once, twice, then clicked alive. "Hello," came the sleepy voice. "Long, it's Auntie May." Pause. "Auntie, is everything okay?" She hesitated for a moment. "I need a favor." "Of course, what do you need?" She looked at the clock. 10:48 p.m. "I need you to help me film something tomorrow. A wedding." Quietly. "Wait, you mean Evan's wedding?" he asked, surprised. She didn't answer directly. "I just need you to come with your camera. Not the big setup. Something small, discreet. Wear black. Tell them you're with the photo crew." "Is that allowed?" "No, but it needs to be done." "Okay. I need you to film everything. Not the flowers, not the cake, not the dancing. I want you to film the people, the speeches, their faces, especially what they say about who paid for what." Long cleared his throat. "Auntie, are you sure?" "I'm sure." "What do I do with the footage?" She pulled an envelope out from under a book. Inside it was cash, 3 crisp $100 bills. "Drop it at my place after the ceremony. No edits, no filters, just the raw truth." There was a long pause on the other end. "Then I'll be there." Click. She sat back, the teacup still untouched. In the corner of the room, James's photo stared back at her. She didn't talk to him tonight. What would be the point? This wasn't prayer. This was war. The next morning broke bright and loud, the kind of autumn day that begged for celebration. The Lormont Hotel stood like a white castle at the edge of town. Flags fluttered. Music drifted through the revolving glass doors. A line of SUVs and town cars glittered at the curb as valets danced between them like tuxedoed ants. Long stood among the crowd holding a slim camera bag and adjusting his black cap. He looked nothing like a guest. That was the plan. He walked through the side entrance and merged into the chaos of the vendor hallway. Florists dragging carts of peonies, tech crew checking wires, makeup artists dabbing concealer onto jittery bridesmaids. He found the photo team, 2 men in suspenders with name tags that read "Golden Hour Visuals." Morning Long nodded at them. "You from Ella's team?" one of them asked. He nodded again confidently. "I'm shooting secondary angles, candid stuff, client request." The guy shrugged. "Cool. Just stay out of the aisle during vows, man. We already got yelled at once." Long smiled, adjusted the lens on his Sony A7 tucked under his jacket, and melted into the venue like he'd done it 100 times. Inside the ballroom, everything looked like a page out of a luxury magazine. Hundreds of white orchids cascaded from a crystal chandelier, gold trim on every chair, tables arranged like a choreographed waltz. A live quartet played softly in the corner. The air smelled like roses and power. Annabelle stood near the altar, radiant in designer lace, surrounded by a swarm of stylists adjusting a hair strand that had dared defy gravity. And Evan stood tall, rehearsing his speech near the bar, not a crease on his suit. Long adjusted his lens, took a test shot. Crisp, perfect exposure, and kept rolling. Guests arrived by the dozens, every handshake captured, every congratulations frozen in amber. Then came the moment Margaret had been waiting for. Evan stepped up to the mic after the first toast. Glass clinks, soft laughter. The quartet faded. "Good evening, everyone," Evan began, voice smooth as silk. "Annabelle and I are beyond honored to share this day with all of you." Long zoomed in, Evan continued. "When we first started planning this wedding, we knew we wanted to do it our way. No excess, no debt, just love." Pause. A chuckle from the crowd. Evan smiled. "So we made a decision to cover it ourselves, every bit of it. No contributions, no obligations. Just two people building a life together from the ground up." Polite applause. The camera caught it all. Annabelle's parents smiled tight and approving. The guests nodded, impressed. A few leaned in, whispering about independence, about class, about how rare it was for a couple to take full financial responsibility these days. Long kept rolling. Every lie, every self-congratulatory glance, every false narrative. By the end of the speech, Evan was glowing. "I want to thank Annabelle's family for their blessings," he added. "And my mother, wherever she is watching from, for everything she taught me, especially how to stand on my own 2 feet. The final nail. Long let the shot linger. He saw it. That little tilt of Evan's chin, the pride, the detachment, the subtle dismissal. And he caught something else too. Annabelle's expression, one of brief confusion before it smoothed into polite applause, like she hadn't known this part was coming. After that, Long moved through the rest of the evening like a shadow. He got the audio. He got the crowd. He got the moment the Redfords told their table. "We're lucky he's so capable. Not every son-in-law could carry this alone." And he got the bartender whispering, "He's pulling this off without family money. Damn, respect." By the time the cake was cut and the first dance finished, Long had 92 minutes of footage, clean, sharp, undeniable. Before midnight, he drove down to Willow Creek, parked 1 block away, and dropped a flash drive into Margaret's mailbox along with a sealed envelope. No note, just truth. Inside, Margaret sat at her desk in the same navy blouse. The lights were off. She didn't need them. She'd been sitting there for hours, waiting for a knock that never came. When she opened the mailbox and saw the flash drive, she didn't hesitate. She plugged it in and watched. The moment Evan said, "We covered it all ourselves," she paused the video. She stared at the screen like it was a stranger. Then she rewound it, played it again. Each syllable was a crack. Each round of applause was a wound. When the video ended, she sat in silence, and for the first time in 24 hours she wept. But it wasn't the weeping of grief. It was the weeping of revelation, of resolve, of rage not as an explosion but as a river steady and deep. She wiped her face, walked to the kitchen and turned on the kettle. As it boiled, she took out her old notebook, the one she used for grocery lists and bakery notes, and she flipped to a clean page. At the top she wrote, "Version of the story that will be told." Below it she wrote, "Not the real one, not the kind I can eat anymore, but one they'll all remember." Then she pulled out her phone, opened a new message, and attached the video. The recipient line, blank. She wasn't ready to send it. Not yet, but soon, because truth like dough must rise, and when it's ready, you bake it in public, where everyone can taste. The sun dipped low over the Oregon coast, casting long gold shadows across the lawn of the Lorrimont Hotel. This wasn't just a wedding. This was a coronation. Glass doors swept open as guests filed into the oceanside ballroom, where everything shimmered, crystal chandeliers dripping like icicles, table runners woven with gold thread, name cards edged in silver leaf. The floral arrangements, orchids, white roses, and imported peonies rose like frozen waves across the hall. Out on the veranda, a 7-piece string ensemble tuned their instruments beneath a canopy of lanterns and champagne flutes. In the center of it all stood Evan May, polished and poised in a charcoal suit custom-tailored down to the last button. He wasn't nervous. No, he was rehearsed. As he shook hands, adjusted his cufflinks, and flashed modest smiles to congratulatory whispers, there was something unmistakable in his eyes' performance. Control. Annabelle floated into view like she belonged to a perfume commercial. Her dress, sleeveless silk with a diamond back, glimmered under every chandelier. She greeted each guest by name, each mother with warmth, each father with strategic interest. When she reached the microphone for the welcome toast, the room stilled. "Thank you all for being here tonight," she began, her voice as clear as a bell. "Evan and I are overwhelmed with gratitude, not only for your presence, but for what this day represents." Her eyes turned to her parents at the head table. "To my mom and dad, thank you for always believing in love, in family, and in standards." A laugh rippled through the crowd. Then she looked at Evan, her smile softening. "And to the man I am now proud to call my husband, the one who built this celebration from scratch, who refused help when it was offered, who insisted on proving that love doesn't need a bank account behind it, it just needs commitment." Applause rose warm and indulgent. Her father, Lawrence Redford, stepped up next. If power had a posture, it wore his shoulders. His speech was brief but precise. "We couldn't have asked for a more capable man to enter our family. Evan stands on his own 2 feet. That's rare today. He's the kind of son-in-law who doesn't lean. He builds. And for that we're proud." Another wave of applause. Margaret May's name was not spoken, not once. Not as mother of the groom, not as a figure in the past. She was air present everywhere, acknowledged nowhere. Long filmed from the back corner camera, rolling in silence. Zooming in, framing every falsehood, every smirk, every carefully curated image. When Evan finally took the microphone, it was as if the ballroom itself exhaled. He walked with the confidence of a man who had just inherited the future. "Annabelle and I made a promise," he began, "that we would start our marriage on our own terms." He turned to the crowd, gesturing gently toward the luxury enveloping them. All of this, every detail, was built from that promise. We didn't take a dime from either side of our families, not because we don't love them, but because we believe in self-respect, in independence, in not being a burden. He paused, then smiled. "I'm proud of that. And I'm proud of the woman beside me. Together we didn't just plan a wedding, we built a legacy." The crowd stood in applause. It was thunderous. It was hollow. Back on Willow Creek, the same sun fell behind the hills. Inside a modest kitchen with dim yellow lights and floral curtains, Margaret sat at her kitchen table wrapped in silence. She had changed out of her silk owl dye and back into an old sweater that smelled faintly of yeast and vanilla. In front of her sat a small plate with one of the wedding rolls she had baked 3 nights earlier. She hadn't refrigerated it. She hadn't offered it to neighbors. She had simply placed it on a dish and waited for it to go stale, like hope. She picked it up now, cradled it in her hands, and took a bite. It was tough, the crust too sharp, the rosemary bitter from time. She chewed slowly, eyes fixed on nothing, the way one reads a verdict already known. No one had called. Not Evan, not Annabelle. Not even a groomsman with a cursory, "Hey, we missed you." No flowers, no voicemail, no acknowledgement. She was not an oversight. She was an intentional omission, and that was the deepest cut. At the Lorrimont, dessert was being served gold leaf panna cotta elderflower tarts, whiskey creme brulee. Waiters in gloves flowed like choreography between tables, topping off glasses with vintage Merlot. Outside on the balcony, the quartet played the opening strains of Vivaldi's Spring. Then drums, a pause in the music. The first boom of fireworks tore through the sky over the ocean. Guests gasped, then laughed, then reached for their phones. Fire burst above them. Chrysanthemums, comets, peonies of light, all choreographed to a soundtrack of love songs and orchestral swells. Evan turned to Annabelle and pulled her close. They kissed beneath the glittering sky as the cameras rolled and the guests clapped and the champagne bubbled into overfull flutes. Long kept his lens steady. He zoomed in on Evan's face, confident gleaming eyes reflecting light not his own. Then he tilted the camera slightly, just enough to catch the contrast, the sea crashing silently in the distance, uncaring, eternal. Back in Riverbend, Margaret watched the same sky explode in streaks of red and gold. She could see them faintly through her kitchen window. She didn't get up. She didn't walk outside to watch. She just kept eating the stale bread slowly, methodically, like it was her penance. One bite for every lie. One bite for every omission. One bite for the boy who once asked her to cut the crusts off his sandwiches. Midnight came. At the Lorimont, the final dance wound down. Shoes came off. Makeup ran. Laughter echoed down the halls as guests stumbled to elevators drunk on wine and spectacle. In the honeymoon suite, Evan stood at the window sipping champagne, watching the last embers of fireworks fade. "I think it went well," he said. Annabelle unpinned her hair. It was beautiful. He looked at her. "I told you we didn't need anyone's help." She smiled, a little less certain. "You really didn't take anything from your mom?" He shook his head. "Nope." Pause. "She's proud of me, but she knows her place." Outside, the sea crashed. Inside, silence spread. And far away, at a quiet table in a kitchen, nobody saw a mother finished her stale bread and folded the last receipt back into its envelope. Not for forgiveness, not for closure, but because she knew what she'd do next. The world believed Evan had built his wedding from scratch. But lies like bread have a way of going stale. And the truth always finds its own table. It was 7:12 a.m. on a Tuesday when the storm began. At first, it was just a ripple, an anonymous Facebook post on a mid-size community group page called Heart of the Valley, Oregon Stories. The profile was blank, the name a generic "Truth is Bread," and the video had no fancy graphics, no hashtags, no call to action. Just a single cutting title. Bread Lady wasn't invited, but paid $100 million for her son's wedding anyway. It started slow. A few reactions, some confused emojis, a share or two. But then the video played, and the ripple turned tidal. The video opened in silence. The first image, a kitchen, modest, yellow-lit, clean. A woman sits at a table alone. In front of her, a stale loaf of homemade bread. She takes a bite slowly, eyes distant. A printed receipt sits next to her plate, highlighted in yellow. 100,000. Recipient Redford Wedding Services. Reference Groom's family. Then the video cut to a ballroom. Fireworks outside, a string quartet inside, speeches. Clear audio. "We didn't take a dime from our families. We paid for everything ourselves. I stand on my own 2 feet." Guest reactions. Applause. Smiles. Cuts back to the woman at her table. The same bite of bread. Same silence. Then words appeared on screen. "This is Margaret May. She baked every loaf for the wedding. She paid $100,000. She wasn't invited." No background music, no commentary. Just truth. The video ended at exactly 2 minutes and 24 seconds. And then everything caught fire. By noon, the video had been shared over 15,000 times. By 3 p.m., local news pages had reposted it. By 600 p.m., national outlets were running headline variations. "Bread of betrayal." "Mother pays for wedding gets cut from guest list." "Educator under fire. After viral wedding scandal. She knows her place." Says Groom, who took $100K and gave no seat. The comments poured in by the second. "I don't even know her and I'm crying. This is the most painful video I've ever watched. Fire him. Immediately. My mom raised me on $10 a week and still showed up in plastic heels to my graduation. Anyone who shames their mother deserves to be alone." Some users did what the internet does best, dig. Within hours, TikTok sleuths had matched the hotel decor with footage from Redford Ballroom's official Instagram. Someone tagged the string quartet's profile. Another found the video of the fireworks from the wedding planner's story, time-stamped and geotagged. And someone else, less generous, more surgical, found Evan May's LinkedIn. Associate Professor, Department of Behavioral Psychology, Oregon Coast University, specializing in family systems and emotional resilience. The irony was delicious. The public was starving. By that evening, Oregon Coast University's inbox was flooded. So was the president's official page. And then the petitions began. Suspend Evan May. Investigate misuse of title and false statements. Support Margaret May, the bread mother. By the end of the night, Bread Mother was trending on Twitter. Someone edited her kitchen footage into black and white slow motion and added violins. Others photoshopped her into the Last Supper, replacing the bread with gold. Memes flooded in. I baked you into existence and you left me outside. Jesus fed 5,000 with 5 loaves. Evan took 100K and fed shame. Within 24 hours, Margaret May had become an icon without saying a word. Back in Willow Creek, Margaret knew none of this. She didn't have Twitter, didn't check Facebook unless a neighbor tagged her in a birthday post. She had no idea that college students across the country were printing her image on T-shirts with the words, "Truth rises, just like dough." But she did notice the change. Her phone buzzed nonstop. Unfamiliar numbers, unfamiliar area codes. Some rang, hung up, rang again. She ignored them all. She turned the ringer off. She unplugged the landline. She let the world knock while she stayed inside. On Wednesday morning, a knock came not on her phone, but her door. It was a woman in her late 30s, blazer too tight, heels too thin. A microphone poked out of her purse like a blade. "Ms. May, I'm with Channel 9 News, just looking for a quote." Margaret opened the screen door slightly. "There's no quote," she said quietly. "I understand. But this story is everywhere. People want to hear from you. You're a symbol now." "I'm a woman who baked bread." The reporter blinked. Margaret added, "Symbols are for statues. I still have dishes to do." And she closed the door. That same day, the university issued a public statement. Oregon Coast University is aware of the concerns raised regarding Associate Professor Evan May. An internal inquiry has been initiated. We take allegations involving personal conduct seriously, especially when they relate to our core values of integrity, respect, and family. Behind the scenes, it was worse. Evan had been called into a meeting with the dean. "What the hell is going on?" the dean asked. "It's a misunderstanding," Evan insisted. "Family stuff. It's complicated." "Did you take the money?" Evan hesitated. "It was a gift. I didn't ask for it." "You denied it publicly. At a university event on tape. It wasn't meant like that." The dean leaned forward. "Fix this. Fast. Or you won't have a class to teach in the fall." Evan called his mother 3 times that evening. She didn't answer. He left voicemails. "Mom, I didn't know this would blow up. I thought I was protecting you. Please talk to me. The university's involved now. I never wanted to hurt you." No response. He texted, "I need your help. Can you just clarify for people that this was miscommunication?" Still silence, because Margaret May understood something her son never did. Silence isn't weakness. It's power. And sometimes the loudest message is the one not spoken. By Friday, late-night hosts were joking about the professor who failed Family 101. A bakery in Iowa renamed their sourdough Margaret's Revenge 100K loaf. Influencers begged for interviews. Writers pitched movie rights. A small publisher offered a cookbook deal. Margaret declined them all. She baked instead. She turned off the noise and turned on the oven. And when a customer asked quietly, "Are you really the bread mother?" she simply smiled and said, "I'm someone who tells the truth, that's all." Because some people build empires of lies with silk and glass and speeches, and others build revolutions with flour and fire. The bell above the bakery door jingled sharp, urgent, like an alarm. Margaret May looked up from the counter, her hands dusted in flour fingers, still sticky from shaping sourdough. She didn't need to turn to know who had come in. She could feel the storm enter before it spoke. Evan, her son. His steps were fast and uneven shoes scraping the tile with the kind of fury that makes furniture nervous. His face was red, part heat, part shame, and in his hand he carried a phone, its screen still lit, flashing with some headline or video. He slammed the door behind him, the jingle breaking into a jarring rattle. "What the hell did you do?" he snapped. Margaret set her dough on the scale, calmly wiped her hands on her apron and turned. "Good morning, Evan." "No," he barked, voice cracking. "Don't give me that. You think this is a game? You humiliated me in front of an entire city." She didn't flinch. "I haven't spoken to anyone." "But you let that video out, didn't you?" "Don't play innocent, Mom. You leaked it. You're behind all of this." She didn't respond immediately. She took her time, walked to the sink, rinsed her hands, turned off the fan above the oven. Only then did she meet his eyes. "You didn't want me at your wedding," she said evenly. "So I stayed home." "That doesn't justify dragging me through the mud," he shouted. "You made me look like a monster. My job's on the line. Do you understand that?" She folded her arms. "I didn't make you look like anything, Evan. You did that all by yourself." He stepped closer, too close, his voice dropped. "You don't get it. This wasn't about hate. It was about image. I've spent my entire career building credibility, building a future. And you were ashamed of me, she interrupted. His mouth stayed open, but no words came out. I wore a conical hat once to your 5th grade recital, she continued. And you didn't talk to me for a week. You said the kids laughed. He blinked. I stayed quiet then. I figured you'd grow out of it. She leaned against the counter now, the old wood worn smooth by time and repetition. I paid for your wedding. I didn't want praise. I didn't want to be paraded. I just wanted to see you happy. He laughed bitterly. This is your version of happy. No, she said. This is my version of honest. Evan's jaw tensed. His hand trembled slightly as he set the phone down on the counter between them, screen up. You know what this is? He said, tapping the screen. It's a video some idiot took from across the street. Me, walking in here, screaming at you. He played it. A shaky camera. A grainy angle through the bakery's front window. His face twisted in anger, her figure calm, passive, wounded. And his voice, you never understood me. Margaret stood in the same place now, watching the same screen. It was surreal watching their real-time pain looped back in digital form. She turned to him. You're right, she said softly. I didn't understand how deep your shame ran. Silence. Outside, a few customers had stopped on the sidewalk. A man with a bike, a woman with a small dog. One of the neighbors across the street leaned out a window, curious. You never wanted a mother, she said. You wanted a stage prop. Evan slammed his hand on the counter. Don't twist this. I worked for everything I have. I built my life. I didn't need the world thinking I had to beg you for money. She stepped forward now, voice rising for the first time. No, Evan. You didn't beg. You took. Quietly. And then you erased me. Her tone sliced through the air like steel through silk. You took my money. You took my bread. You took the warmth of a home that stayed up all night baking for your guests. Then you put me in a cab and told the driver to make sure I didn't come back. His eyes widened. I never said that. No, but you let it happen. They stood in the center of the bakery like two sides of a cracked mirror. His hands clenched, hers open and raw. You say I embarrassed you, she continued. But let me tell you something. Her voice dropped lower, tighter, but each word landed like a drumbeat. There is no shame in raising a child alone. No shame in making bread at 4 a.m. No shame in being poor. But there is shame in pretending you came from nowhere. Evan's chest rose and fell fast. He looked around, suddenly aware of how quiet the street had become, how a few phones were out, how a teenager across the street was pretending to tie his shoe but recording sideways. He grabbed the old wedding cake box still sitting on the side shelf, a small white square slightly crushed at the edges. He opened it, stared at the loaf inside, then raised it above his head and slammed it down on the counter. Crumbs flew. The loaf split. Margaret didn't move. I hate that damn bread, he spat. You act like it's sacred, like you're some saint because you fed people. I fed you, she said, calm as winter, every day. And then for the first time her voice broke. But you don't know the taste of hunger, I do. That silence was different. It was older. Evan stepped back like her words had hit something soft in his chest. You've spent your whole life trying to be better than where you came from, she said. But you forgot roots don't disappear just because you look up. He stood still. No interview could have ruined you like your own words did. You said them, in a suit, with fireworks behind you. Evan looked down at the crumbs at his hands, at the reflection of himself in the bakery glass. His face looked smaller than before, younger, ungrounded. He opened his mouth, then closed it, and walked out. No final word, just the bell above the door jingling again, this time soft hollow. 2 hours later, the video hit Twitter. Groom from viral bread video screams at mother in her own bakery. This time the audio was clearer. The confrontation was raw. The image of Evan slamming the wedding loaf became the thumbnail seen around the country. He was no longer just the man who excluded his mother. He was the man who shouted her into silence. Comments were nuclear. She's not a stage prop. She's the reason he exists. Fire him already. I wouldn't trust him to teach a cactus. Imagine screaming at the hands that fed you. The university issued a second statement that night. In light of new information, Professor Evan May has been placed on administrative leave pending further review. Margaret didn't say a word. She washed the counter. She swept the crumbs. She lit incense by the photo of her late husband and whispered, I didn't raise him for this, but I won't kneel for it either. The next morning a sign went up on her door. Closed for cleaning. Reopens tomorrow. Truth still rises. And across town, a billboard lit up paid for by strangers' donations pooled by the hour. On it, a photo of Margaret May, holding bread. Beneath it, the words, "Some mothers bake, some mothers break. She did both, and stayed whole." The ring landed on the marble countertop with a dull, decisive clink. Annabelle didn't cry. She didn't raise her voice. She simply set the engagement ring down as if placing a receipt for something that no longer fit. Evan stood frozen in his living room, half-dressed, half sure of anything anymore. His blazer hung unevenly on one shoulder. His tie, loosened, drooped like an afterthought. His face was pale, sleepless, pale, scandal pale. "Is this a joke?" he asked quietly. Annabelle shook her head. "No, Evan. The joke was believing I ever really knew you." Outside, the sound of waves was calm and different. Annabelle stood near the window, her silhouette outlined by morning light. She looked elegant, even in collapsed posture. Upright eyes, clear voice, firm. "My parents trusted you," she continued. "I trusted you. You told everyone you built this future alone. But it was all built on a mission. That's not strength. That's cowardice." Evan stepped forward. "You don't understand." "No," she said, sharp as glass. "It's you who doesn't understand. I don't care that your mother paid. I care that you buried her so far beneath your ego it took the entire internet to dig her out." The air between them thickened. Evan's hand twitched like reaching for a past he could no longer revise. Annabelle gestured toward the television, which was muted but still glowing with headlines. "Bread Mother speaks through silence. University launches. Inquiry into false income declarations. Engagement implodes under public pressure." She didn't have to say a word, Annabelle whispered. And yet, everyone heard her louder than they ever heard you. She picked up her purse. "My father says your lies reflect on our entire family. The wedding's off. Permanently." Evan inhaled sharply, desperate to pivot. "We can fix this." Annabelle looked him in the eyes. "You can't even fix your mother's heart. What makes you think you can fix a marriage?" She walked out. No goodbye. No door slam. Just the soft pull of a handle, and the finality of footsteps retreating down a hallway filled with flower arrangements now meant for no one. Within hours, the Redford family issued a statement. "In light of recent revelations, we are withdrawing from any association with Mr. Evan May. Trust, integrity, and familial respect are core values we cannot compromise." The message was cold, professional. It burned all the same. Sometime that afternoon, the local newspaper published an exposé. "The Image of Independence. Professor May's Double Life." It listed not just the wedding scandal, but allegations from the university's financial office about discrepancies in grant reporting, misrepresented donations, and inconsistencies in housing reimbursements. Then came the call from the Economic Crime Division, a polite voice on the other end. "Mr. May, we'd like to invite you in for a voluntary conversation regarding financial statements tied to your employment contract. You're not under arrest. Yet." The word "yet" hung like smoke. Evan agreed, numb. He sat on the edge of his bed later that evening, scrolling through his phone. Every app full of him. Every version of him not his. One video showed his face mid-yell inside his mother's bakery, frozen at the worst angle, captioned, "5-star groom melts down in mom's bread shop." Another TikTok featured a side-by-side. Left Evan at the wedding saying, "We didn't take a dime." Write a receipt showing Margaret May's $100,000 transfer with royalty-free violin music building in the background. The comments were savage. What's the return policy on a son? He didn't need her, but he needed her. Big talk from a man baked in lies. Meanwhile, across town, Margaret reopened her bakery with no press release, no statement. Just flour, fire, and focus. But behind the glass display case beside the baguettes and the rye, she taped a small sign no larger than a recipe card. Simple white background, black ink, elegant cursive. "Thank you for not inviting me." No explanation, no context, and yet everyone understood. Customers stared at it like scripture. Some took photos, others asked if they could buy a print. Margaret always smiled and shook her head. "It's not for sale," she said, "it's just a reminder." That week the bakery didn't slow down. If anything, the lines grew. Some came for the sourdough, others for something deeper. Grief-bought coffee, guilt-glazed pastries. People left bigger tips. Teenagers left drawings. A woman from Idaho mailed her a hand-sewn apron with the words, "Mothers don't need invitations, they built the house." But Margaret, she stayed quiet. No press, no podcast, no staged forgiveness arc. She baked. She lived. She healed in kneading, not noise. And when a reporter finally managed to slip inside the bakery and ask Mrs. May any plans to reconcile with your son, she answered without turning, "I don't bake for applause, and I don't bleed twice for the same wound." Then she rang up the woman's cinnamon roll and returned to her oven. On Friday morning, Evan stood outside the university gates. The meeting with investigators was over. His leave had turned into suspension. His access badge didn't work anymore. He tried to email the dean. It bounced. He tried to log into his portal. Access denied. His future, once forecasted in confident lectures and wedding speeches, was now locked behind doors he had sealed himself. He wandered back home and saw a package waiting at the door. No return label. Just his name. Inside, a single bread roll, wrapped in linen. No note. Just warmth. Real, present, undeniable. He stared at it for a long time, then sat on the floor and for the first time in weeks cried. Not for the career, not for the wedding, but for a woman who gave everything and asked for nothing but a seat in the back row, because some invitations once ignored become warnings, and some mothers once silenced become legends. The sign was hand-painted, not flashy, not neon, just a slab of reclaimed wood sanded down smooth with soft white lettering that carried the weight of 1,000 unsaid things. Mother not invited, bread that stays. Below that in smaller script, eat once, remember forever. The bakery sat on this corner of 2 quiet streets near the edge of town, far enough from the tourist buzz to stay grounded close enough that people knew where to find it. The paint on the walls was new, but the soul behind the counter was the same. It had been 1 month since the scandal, 1 month since the wedding, 1 month since Margaret May, breadmaker and mother of the year and the century, some said, had been shoved out of her son's big day, then shoved into the hearts of 1,000,000 strangers. But she wasn't looking for revenge. She was looking for rhythm, routine, risen dough. Opening day was supposed to be soft. Just a few friends, maybe some loyal customers from the old spot. But word had spread quietly at first, then like wildfire under a dry wind. At 5:45 a.m., the line had already wrapped halfway down the block. By 6:30, news vans had parked illegally on both sides of the street. By 7 Hosers, a drone hovered overhead, courtesy of a college student doing a thesis on viral healing. Inside, Margaret stood in the same white apron she'd worn for 30 years, not for branding, for habit. She wasn't trying to be a symbol. She just wanted to bake. But the people wanted more. A middle-aged man in a suit wept openly when she handed him a roll. A woman who'd flown in from Oregon asked if she could hug her. Margaret said yes quietly with a smile, but kept her hands gloved in flour. She gave as always without show. Local television showed up before noon. The anchor wore too much makeup and kept mispronouncing conical hat, but the camera crew was kind and respectful. The interview was brief. Why the name, the anchor asked. Margaret looked her straight in the eye. Because not every table has room for a mother, but every oven does. The crew stood in silence for a moment before cutting. By mid-afternoon, the crowd had shifted. Fewer reporters, more students, more curious wanderers who didn't know the story but could smell something ancient and right in the air. One girl, maybe 20, left a note folded like a crane at the window. It read, "You taught me what love looks like when it gets tired and chooses to stand anyway." But the most important guest arrived without fanfare. He came alone, dusty shoes, a frayed baseball cap, eyes too tired for someone so small. The boy stood outside the shop for 20 minutes before stepping in. Margaret saw him through the glass. She always noticed those who hesitated. She greeted him at the door. "Hungry?" she asked gently. He nodded, quiet. She gave him a simple roll, warm, nothing fancy. He held it like treasure. After a long pause, he spoke, voice thin. "I don't have a mom." Margaret knelt, not out of drama, out of instinct. She looked him in the eyes. "Well," she said, "that doesn't mean you can't have someone to teach you how to bake." His lip quivered. "Really? From now on, this oven's open to you." He leaned in, hugged her. No cameras caught it, no tweets. But in that moment, something old and holy settled in the room. A fracture healed. The next morning, Margaret added a new sign to the wall. It read, "You don't have to be blood to be fed. You don't have to be invited to be wanted." She began offering weekend classes free for kids who didn't have parents, or had parents too busy working double shifts to braid bread on Saturdays. People started calling her Mom May. She didn't fight it, not because she needed the title, but because the world needed what it meant. Meanwhile, across town, her old bakery remained empty, shut tight, its windows dusty, its name scraped off. People said Evan had been seen once or twice at a grocery store, at a gas station, but never inside the bakery. He never came to the new one, never asked for rolls, never asked for forgiveness. And Margaret, she never mentioned him again, not out of spite, out of respect for herself, for her boundaries, for the peace she'd found after burning down the part of her heart that begged to be seen. But the city didn't forget. Neither did the internet. Margaret's little bakery began appearing on travel blogs, food channels, even morning talk shows. The bread that healed a nation, from disinvited to divine mother, not invited but always present. One food critic wrote, "She doesn't serve just bread. She serves consequence with compassion, salt with soul." At the end of each day, Margaret stood in the doorway and watched the sun set over her new chapter. She didn't measure success in tips or headlines. She measured it in silence, in that moment when the last customer left and the oven still hummed and her heart didn't ache anymore. She was still not invited to her son's life, but she'd invited the world to her table, and somehow that was enough. The phone rang at 8:17 p.m. on a Thursday. Margaret almost didn't answer. Her hands were still dusted with flour, and the sourdough needed 10 more minutes in the oven. But something in the rhythm of the ring made her stop, made her wipe her hands on her apron and lift the receiver. "Mom," Evan's voice, the first she'd heard in months. She didn't speak right away. "Mom, it's me. I need to ask you something." She leaned against the wall, calm but cautious. "I'm listening." A breath, a pause. "Can you take the video down? Or at least tell them to stop sharing it. I'm trying to apply for another position. But they keep bringing it up. It's ruining my chances." Margaret closed her eyes. "I didn't post it." "I know, but they say it came from your bakery, from someone who knows you. You could ask them, or just help me, please." She looked around her shop, the quiet tables, the warm light, the shelf of handwritten letters from strangers, and then her eyes settled on the small wooden sign behind the register. "Thank you for not inviting me." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She just said, "I didn't post the truth, Evan, but I won't erase it either." A beat. He sighed. "So you're just going to let this hang over me forever?" Margaret's voice was steady. "I let you go once, remember, when you asked the driver to take me home before your wedding. I let you walk away. I didn't make a scene, didn't chase you, didn't beg for a seat." She paused. "But now you need me. Now you remember my number." Silence. "Then, Mom, it was a mistake. I didn't mean—" "No," she said, cutting gently. "You meant it. You meant every silence, every edit, every time you thought I was too plain, too small, too inconvenient." Her tone cracked just slightly. "I needed you that day, Evan. I waited in the car wearing my best dress, holding the box of bread I baked for you, and no one opened the door." He didn't reply. She finished softly. "Now you know what it feels like." She hung up, not out of anger, out of closure. The next day, a girl walked into the bakery. She looked about 20, nervous and kind-eyed, holding a small envelope in both hands. "Hi," she said. "Are you Mrs. May?" Margaret smiled, wiping her hands. "Yes, dear. What can I get you?" The girl shook her head. "I don't need bread. I came to give you this." She held out the envelope. Margaret opened it. Inside was a simple note. "Dear Mrs. May, I was in Professor May's class last semester. He never spoke of you, not once, but after everything came out, I realized you were always there, in his values, his stories, his drive. We just didn't know the name behind the strength. You are the mother he never honored, but I wanted to. Thank you, Elise student." Margaret held the note to her chest. Then she went to the shelf where the letters lived. She added this one on top. Margaret stood behind the counter, her hands still dusted with flour, the soft scent of morning loaves lingering in the air. Outside, the sign still read, "Mine. Mother not invited. Bread that stays." But something inside her had changed, not broken, shifted. She'd spent decades rising before dawn, kneading dough, saving every coin, and pouring herself into a son who no longer wanted to remember her name. But now the world was remembering her not as his mother, but as her own story. She started writing, not for revenge, not to shame, just to be heard finally fully. Her book was titled, "The Bakery, A Life Uninvited." It wasn't poetic, it was honest. She wrote in bursts between oven timers during slow afternoons and long into the night. Every page was a slice of truth, the love, the hunger, the silence. The morning she held a wedding cake alone in a quiet kitchen while firecrackers lit the sky elsewhere. Within a month, the ebook topped regional downloads. People didn't just read it, they felt it. And then came an email from a local women's charity. Would you teach baking classes? For single mothers, for women starting over. Margaret answered the same way she always had, with action, not applause. Every Saturday, the back room of the bakery transformed. Tables lined with flour sacks, rolling pins, stainless steel bowls, and nervous eyes watching her. She taught them how to bake, but more than that, how to stand. You don't need to be invited, she'd tell them. You just need to show up and knead. Some women cried the first time their bread rose. Others laughed like girls when cinnamon glaze hit just right. One woman sold her first batch at the night market. Another, quiet and bruised, whispered, "You helped me remember my name." Reporters came again. One asked, "Why give back when the world, even your own son, turned away from you?" Margaret looked straight into the lens, her words soft but sharpened with clarity. A mother is someone who doesn't wait for a seat at the table. She shows up when she's needed, and when she's not, she walks away. But not empty. She walks towards someone who is. She smiled. Not for the camera, for herself. No apology had come, but she had already forgiven life and chosen her own. Life as it does continued. Evan was formally suspended from the university. The internal investigation turned into public scrutiny. Students protested the administration. The Alumni Association quietly removed his name from their Rising Stars roster. He tried freelancing, a few clients, some guest lectures online. Nothing permanent. The spotlight that once warmed him now burned. I'm now happily married to a local entrepreneur, sent out digital invitations 6 months later. Her parents made it clear. No press, no May family, no past. Quinn's name became a ghost in their household. Back in the bakery, Margaret kept baking. But more than that, she kept receiving. Letters. Dozens at first. Then hundreds. From strangers. From mothers who hadn't seen their children in years. From sons who left home and carried shame. From daughters disowned for loving the wrong person, the wrong way, the wrong dreams. Each letter a piece of someone who found courage in her story. One woman wrote, "Your pain gave me language. Your silence gave me power. Your bread gave me warmth when no one else would." Margaret kept them in a drawer beneath the counter, labeled simply "Those Who Remembered." One Sunday morning, the camera crew from the original viral video returned. But this time it wasn't for scandal. It was for a follow-up, to see what became of the woman no one invited. They found her sitting outside her shop in the soft sun of early morning. A young girl, the orphan who now called her Grandma May, stood beside her apron covered in flour, mimicking her hands as they needed air. Laughter, the smell of freshly baked baguettes, and that sign still hanging proudly. "Mother not invited, bread that stays." The camera rolled. "Mrs. May," the interviewer asked gently, "if your son could hear you now, what would you say?" Margaret turned, slowly looked directly into the lens. Her voice was warm, but it did not waver. "The bread I bake doesn't need an invitation to be remembered. People remember warmth, truth, kindness." She paused, looked at the child beside her, flour smudged across the girl's cheek. "But what about you, Evan?" A small smile curled. "Do you still remember your mother?"